Hi, good morning. This is Andy White with Epygi, and I will be your host this morning. Thank you so much for joining. Many of you are partners with Clearfly Communications, and we want to thank Bob and Tom at Clearfly for helping to organize the call. This morning, we're going to be discussing the basics of configuring SIP trunks. We'll look at the settings, as well as the SIP messages. Okay. As far as the agenda, we'll look at discuss the SIP trunking options. We'll configure a SIP account. We'll look at the outbound calling, configure the DIDs, as well as look at the incoming SIP calls, outgoing SIP calls, and modifying caller ID. All right, when you get service with a SIP trunk, you're going to sign up with an ITSP. That's an Internet Telephony Service Provider. And they're going to deliver service to you across the internet, or maybe even across a private connection. But the first thing you'll do is you'll get an account with them, and they're going to give you some DIDs. A DID is basically just the 10-digit phone number. All right. ITSPs, they're going to deliver their and bundle their packages and services differently. You'll find from one ITSP to the next. Some will just charge a straight amount, X amount of dollars per month, maybe a little extra for each DID that you get, and then a certain amount for each minute of talk time. Others might bundle a package based on a certain number of minutes, certain number of trunks, maybe the amount of simultaneous phone calls. Technically, there's really no limitation on the number of simultaneous calls. You can have as many calls as you want. Some ITSPs, though, they might restrict the number of calls based on their package. Others don't care how many calls that you make, since they're just billing based on minutes. So just more minutes you use, obviously the more you're going to get billed each month. But as far as technical limitations, it really comes down to how much bandwidth that you have. If you're figuring out if you need to figure out, although the bandwidth is pretty much, we don't talk about having bandwidth limitations as much these days. But if you're trying to figure out how much bandwidth you're going to use, you can figure roughly about 100 kilobits per call. Maybe the other limitation might be with the PBX and how many calls it's going to handle. But even though the bundles are different, a couple things, there's some commonalities. And that's the way that they deliver and send the calls to you. Okay, there's two methods that they're going to use to deliver the calls to you. The first being, here's a drawing. It has a PBX, it's an Epygi QX50. It has the phones on the LAN of the PBX, and on the WAN side there's a firewall and a connection to the internet and going out to the ITSP. All right, so when you get a call for one of your DIDs from the PSTN, the call is going to go to the ITSP, and now they need to know, of all the IP addresses in the world, they need to know where your IP address is located. Okay, and there's two methods that they're going to use to identify that. The first being, they're just going to ask you, and they'll put that on as a record on your account. And basically for this particular DID, this is the IP address that they're going to send that call to. And that's very straightforward. Okay, that also implies that you must have a static public IP address. That's not going to change. All right, the second method would be based on, and that's what we're going to show you today, is based on a registration where the ITSP is going to give you the account information, and you're going to enter that information into the PBX, and that account will register periodically to the ITSP. It can be anywhere from a minute or less up to typically maybe an hour. So what happens is it goes off, it performs what we call a registration to the ITSP. When that registration takes place, at that point they know and they're able to identify where that registration is coming from, and they'll be able to send it to your IP address once the call is received. All right, so we're going to be looking at that method today. As far as protocols for making the voice over IP phone calls, there's two protocols that come into play. The first one that we've already mentioned is it's going to be SIP. That's short for Session Initiation Protocol. It's an RFC standard, RFC 3261 from the Internet Engineering Task Force. Okay, and it's used to register the SIP trunk, and it's also used for call control, for making calls, monitoring calls, disconnecting calls. All right, and that's going to establish the call itself. That's call control. Now, the second protocol that comes into play is, which is really important, obviously, and that's going to be for voice, and that's real-time transport protocol, or RTP. That's a network protocol used to transmit and receive the actual voice and video on the call using any one of the many codecs that are available. All right, I'm going to log into the PBX, and we're going to configure the account. All right, so again, here if we look at the status of this QX 200, and if I look at system status network, you can see on the LAN port, it's a private network 172.30, and then on the WAN, there's a private IP 192.168.1.185, and then there's also a VPN configured across it. All right, so the phones are on the LAN, and the WAN is going to make a connection through the router through the firewall and to the ITSP. Okay, let's take a look at some other settings. I'm hoping my voice is going to hold out for me. I've had a little bit of a cold here lately, so my voice is a little rough. Sorry for that, but I think we'll be all right. Okay, so get the telephony, look at SIP, and here's your port number, port 5060, and that's what's used for both UDP. You'll notice it's UDP and TCP. All right, and so that's the port number being used on my PBX. It doesn't have to be 5060, and even if the ITSP uses 5060, you don't have to use 5060. Okay, that's kind of a misnomer out there in the field that the port SIP port, they have to be matched exactly with what the far end is using, but that's not the case. Here's the RTP settings. All right, down here, actually at the top you can see the codecs that are being used. This is the first one being GSUM 11. That's MULAW. That's North American Standard. That's going to be the same method for encoding voice, the same voice quality that's out there on the PSTN network, and it's always been there for the last, I don't know how many years, going back to the 70s and 60s, where it samples the voice at 8,000 times a second. All right, so it's the same exact voice quality. And then it's MULAW and then ALAW is for European. There's some other codecs there, G729 and G711. There's only two that you ever see it used anymore, for the most part. Here's a range of ports for the RTP. So every phone call will be assigned and use its own RTP port. or ports for that particular session for that phone call. So there's 7,000 to 7,255. Okay. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to configure our trunk with ClearFly. On the obviously we're showing you the Epygi PBX. We do have a voice over IP carrier wizard to help you configure your settings, but you can also enter them manually. Excuse me. Okay, so here you got the voice over IP carrier and the wizard, and there's a drop down, some of the ITSPs. Okay, there's ClearFly, so we can choose them. All right, so here's where you put in your account name. I do have this available for me. And your account password that you're given. I'll copy that over. And let me see, I do need to change that because I've got a test trunk, so that information is going to be different. And their port that they're using is also 5060. I will enable this RTP proxy option. And on the last page here, you have the option of being able to define when you make the call, what digits are you going to be used. So this is going to create the entries in our call routing table. So you can dial with a prefix, for example, dial 9, or with a pattern that might be where you pick up the phone and just dial a pattern for, like example, like 10 digits. So I'll just do the dial 9. I'll create a failover to the PSTN, which is out on the FXO ports. Okay, so we finished the wizard there, and it's going to do a couple things for us within the Epygi PBX. It creates an account, which is an extension 99. You can see it's added by the voice over IP carrier wizard. If I go to the SIP settings, it has the account information, and it's the option to register on the SIP server is enabled and checked. So what happened? Let's take a look. So if we look at status, and this time I'm going to look at SIP registration. Okay, you can see the account name, the server, and the fact that it is registered. Okay, so that's a good thing. We're off to a good start. So if I look at maintenance, let's see what took place. And on the PBX, we do have some buffers that you can, that's going to be very useful once you get familiar with these. I'm going to look at the SIP registration, and I'm just going to search for that account information. Okay, so let's see, 10:15. This was the start of the registration. Okay, so here is a SIP registration message. Okay, this is the contents of it from the buffer start to the buffer end. You'll see the contents of the register message. Okay, within the Epygi PBX, you can just look right above the top line. You can see who sent that message, where did it come from, and where's it going. So this message came from our WAN IP address, the 192.168.1.185, port number 5060, and it's going to ClearFly account. After it resolves the host name, it comes up with an IP address and port number 5060. So that might be, if you have problems registering, you might want to check to make sure that you can send a ping, or make sure it's resolving the destination host name. In this case, here I've got it highlighted right here, that's their server. So that might be a problem if for some reason the DNS server is not working, because it has to resolve that to an IP address. So it sends the register message to them, and in that register message, it has a sequence number. So if you're trying to follow the messages, and that's one way you can look at the message to see the responses. You can follow the sequence number, and you can also follow along with the call ID. So that should be the same from one message to the next. So when we get a response back, we're expecting to see the same sequence number and call ID. All right, and in here it mentions that this is the Epygi PBX that's sending that. And in response, we do get a message back, a 401 unauthorized message. Okay, it came from them. You notice the sequence number is right there in the unauthorized, and the call ID is there at the top line. So in response to the unauthorized message, the PBX will send a second register message. You notice this time it has all this additional information in it, the username and password. Why did it not send it the first time? I don't know. This is, but we'll always see that. Okay. In here, there's a username and an encrypted password. This is register sequence number 2. And because the username password was correct, they responded with a 200 OK message, which means that at that point it is successfully registered. Now, if you look in here, there's some other information. It says it expires in 30 seconds. It's pretty short. Okay, sometimes you'll see, typically you'll see that up to an hour. So you've got the expiration, this is 30 seconds. So yes, that is a very short amount of time. And what does that mean for us? That means for the PBX, it needs to re-register every 30 seconds or less. Okay, if it fails to register in that time frame, then we're not going to receive any calls. Okay, why do they use such a short time? I have some ideas. I think it's they're probably trying to use that short registration time to keep open the firewall that's out in front of the PBX. Okay, is similar to this scenario where you got a firewall out in front, and that port will close after there's been an outbound message. After a certain amount of time, that port is going to be slammed shut, and they would not be able to send calls to you. So they're using a short expiration time to keep that port open. As long as there's activity on that port's going to stay open. So let's see if we comply with that. So that was 10:15 and 35 seconds. And sure enough, less than 30 seconds later, we send out the process repeats. So this is sequence number 3. And then you see the register message going out once again. All right, so the registration is working, and you'll see the activity going on. Let's see if we can. Let's take a look at the call routing entries that were created when we used our VoIP Carrier Wizard, and that's under telephony and call routing. And the new entries were created down here at the bottom. So there's a dial 9, and then there's wildcard. I delete the 9 because Clearfly does not want to see the 9, so we have to delete it. All right, and then we make, after we dial 9, we're going to make a call to their account, to the server, port 5060. So if I dial 9 and the phone number, that should go out at this point. You notice there's also a second entry here for, this is the 911 failover, where it makes an outbound call to the out on the FXO port. So before I make an outbound call, I'm going to go back and I'm going to mark the logs. Okay, we do that under system log settings. We could put a log marker, we'll call it test 1. All right, we mark the logs. Now if I dial 972-692-1166. And
welcome to Epygi Technologies. If you know the extension of the person you are trying to reach.
All right, so if we look at the dashboard,
product information and sales.
if we look at the dashboard, you can see I called from extension 100 and it made an outbound call. I'm going to go ahead and hang up. Let's look at our logs and see what took place. This time I'm going to look at SIP user agent. And I'll search for test 1. That's the usefulness of that log marker. Okay, the first part here is just collecting digits from the phone itself. You can see this is the this was a Polycom phone. It made collected the digits. So the first part is just collecting digits from the phone, and then we get to the part where we're sending the outbound call to Clearfly. Here it's coming from the PBX, going to Clearfly once again with our phone number to the main office, 972-692-1166. And so you can see the outbound message. Again, here's a sequence number, 745. This is called an invite, by the way. That's the start of any given phone call. It begins with an invite. And you notice that it has my contact information, so when they respond, that's where they should be sending the responses to. And here's just as important, here's where they're going to be sending the audio to that IP address and port number 7180. Okay, so that's right in the range of those RTP ports that I told you earlier. And the codec that's being used is G.711, which is, you'll see it referenced as PCMU. So we send the invite, they respond to every message. The message that gets sent out has to be responded to. So they do. They respond with a trying message. Basically, that's an acknowledgement of the receipt of the invite. Okay. They also respond with an unauthorized message. Okay. And we acknowledge that we received the unauthorized. So what do? We resend the invite, and once again, then now it has the username password in it. Why didn't it send at the beginning? I'm not sure, but you'll see that or repeated. But here it is. There's the username. There's an encrypted password, and we're still using port 7180. And it responds with a trying, then they respond with a ringing message. Since we got the ringing message, we're going to send the ringing message back to the phone so that the user can hear the ring back. Okay, that ringback is played locally from the phone itself. It's not across the network. It's the phone that gives you the actual ringback. Okay, and once the call gets answered, they send us a 200 OK message. Okay, and that's basically the call being answered, and they want to send the audio. When we send our audio to them, we're going to be sending it to this IP address and this port number, 33990, and they are okay with the G.711 codec in use. So we let the phone know that the call has been answered. At that point, everybody acknowledges the messages, and they can begin conversation with the two-way audio. Okay, one of the things on this outbound message is the caller ID. Okay, if we look at the outbound caller ID that we sent with the outbound invite, it was coming from the account name. Okay, we've got some DIDs from Clearfly, and we want to actually have that contact being the DID number that we've been given. So let me see if we can modify that. All right, so if I go into telephony, I'm going to do two things. So we modify this entry. So here you see the pattern, dial 9, wildcard, any number of digits after that. We're going to delete the 9, make an IP to PSTN call. There's their server. You notice this use extension settings, that's where it's getting the account information. So that when they request for the authorization username password, that's where it's coming from. In the source number pattern, we don't care which extension it is, but it's going to be an extension of the PBX. Here's where we can modify the caller ID, and this so happens to be one of the DIDs, 689-207-6970. All right, I'm going to mark the logs. We'll call this test 2. I'll redial. Okay, and we got an error. It says check, it gave us an error message on that call. I want to show you what happened. So we go to test 2, and again, these are the digits coming from the phone, the invites from the phone itself. This is the outbound invite to Clearfly. And we look at the information for the username and password. So it has the new contact information now. You can see it has the ID. So that looks good. Now, this is the user authorization information that we're providing to Clearfly. And you notice the username. The username is the same as our DID number. That's not going to work. Okay, so the way that we correct that is within our PBX is we go to extension 99. Here's the username. Just go to the SIP advanced settings, and it has the authorization username in here. All right, next week we're going to continue the discussion. We'll look at these keep alive messages and how they work. So I'm going to bait you a little bit for next week's discussion. All right, so let's do test 3 and see if our call, if we can get it to complete this time. And if it doesn't work, we will have to call ClearFly.
Epygi Technologies.
Okay.
If you know the extension of the person you are trying to.
All right, let's look at that call. So we go to, actually I made 2 calls. Let's do this one, test 4, sorry. So we can find our call very easily. Redial.
Welcome to Epygi Technologies. If you know the extension.
All right, let's go to the logs, SIP user agent. Let's go to test 4. Again, we're collecting digits from the phone. We'll pass all that up. Here's the first invite going to ClearFly, unauthorized, and the second invite going out. In this case, it has our correct caller ID, and it also has a correct username. So for that reason, the call was able to complete. Okay, they should have given us an error. Actually, we should take a look at the error that we received on the previous call. I think it was test 4, maybe. It might be on the next page. Because when that call fails, they're going to give you some an indicator as to why that call failed. Or maybe it was test 5. Okay. Oh, there's test 4. Okay. So test 4. Okay, I missed the error message. I wanted to show you that. I guess I can remove it again and we can do one more call. Just so you could get familiar with the different errors that you might see at different times. All right, we'll save this. And we'll go do a new call. This call should fail, but I did want to show you the error message that you get. Oh yeah, we're only on test 4 right now. So let's do test 5. Okay, that call is not going through. Okay, so here's the series of invites going out to ClearFly, and actually we didn't get a response on that call. We can try it one more time. All right, test 6. So you'll see that the messages, you should get a response immediately. Okay, I did get an error message that time. Test 6. Invite trying, unauthorized, acknowledged. We resend the second invite trying. So what happens is when we send the invite to them with the incorrect username, they acknowledge that they got that message, but then they're going to request, this time they're going to request the information again. They're going to still say that the call is unauthorized until you correct that username. All right, so you should, once you send the username password, you should get the call to proceed. The call should complete at that point. All right, so let's so we've got the outbound. We've taken a look at that. All right, and we've seen the some of the settings briefly. Let's take a look at the inbound call now. So this was our DID 689-207 6970. So I'm just going to copy that. So we've entered the information for making the outbound calls. Now let's look at the inbound call. So let's inbound call to the DID. So we're going to do a new log marker test 7, and I've got a phone here beside me using the soft phone here, and
Port dialed does not exist.
all right, it gave me an error. Basically, the account doesn't exist. So let's see what happens. If I go to the logs, SIP user agent, search for test 7, the first message we should get below our log marker is an incoming call. As you can see, this is coming from Clearfly port 5060. It's coming to the PBX. So we are receiving the call, and you can see here's the DID, here's the to field. So you got two lines with the DID in it. There's the to field, and then the first invite, the header message. Okay, so the DID is located in both. We're usually going to be looking at the to field. They should be one and the same most often. I have seen them where they're different, but we're going to look at the to field. So that's what it's looking for. So we get an incoming call from Clearfly. They're trying to set up the call, and we respond with a trying message. The system is looking for the DID at this point, and it does not find it. So in this case, it responds with a 404 not found. So a couple of things to take away from this is, number one, first and foremost, as I always say and tell everybody, we can't process a call that we don't receive. So if you're not getting, the first thing you want to do, if you're having problems with your inbound calls, the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you're getting the invite for the DID number. Okay, we can't process a call that we don't receive. So if you're not getting the invite, then it might be an external problem, maybe with the firewall. Maybe you have to open up a port 5060 to allow that message to come through to your PBX. Or maybe they're not sending it to you correctly. Or maybe you haven't registered to them correctly. So a lot of those things, but that might be a call to Clearfly. Say, basically ask them where's the call going? Are you sending the call to me? So you got to get the invite. If you don't get it, then you can't process the call. In this case, we received it, and we received a 404, or the PBX sent out a 404 not found message because we don't have the DID entered yet, okay? So I'm going to enter the DID, and so we can process the call. So we go to telephony, and I'm going to add an entry in here. There's the 10-digit DID number. We're going to delete all digits. And we're going to send the call to extension 00, which is our auto tenant. This is an external call coming in, so I need to change the source type. If we look at the bottom of the table here, you can see there's the DID. It's been entered. So at this point, let's go in and mark the logs in case we have any problems. All right, and let's make that call again.
Auto attendant. If you know your party's extension, please enter it now or press pound for extension directory.
Okay. You can see the call came in. externally from ClearFly to 00, which is our auto attendant. Let's look at the logs. And I think it was test 7, was it? Or 8? I think it's 8. All right, so here's the incoming call to the DID that we respond with trying. We found the DID, so at this point we respond with a ringing message, and the call gets answered and connected to the auto attendant, so we respond this time with a 200 OK message. This is the audio port we're using, 7210, using the codec G.711, so some of these things should start looking familiar to you by now. This is the sequence number to match the one that was sent to us from ClearFly. All right, so at that point the call is established. Everybody acknowledges that the call is established. And then eventually the call is disconnected with a bye message. The far end is the one that disconnected the call because we got the bye message from ClearFly. And that ends the phone call. And we acknowledge receipt of that bye message with the 200 OK. All right. At this point, we want to look at within the system itself, we do have some firewall settings. In the filtering rules, we can allow SIP access. Excuse me. So within the PBX itself, we're allowing SIP access from a group of IPs called SIP. We just named the group SIP access. And here you can see SIP access, and you can see a list of all the IPs that we're allowing. So with that firewall in place, the PBX is only going to be listening to SIP traffic from those friendly IPs, one of them being ClearFly. Okay, and so any other calls coming in from the outside, they're not going to reach to my PBX. Those same set of rules can be applied also to your external firewall. All right, I think that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to show this morning. Go back to our slide here just briefly. Let's continue from the current slide. So a little bit about Epygi, just to close it off here. We are an American company design. We've been developing our products now since year 2000. I personally have been with Epygi since it's been about 18 years. So I've got a long track record, been here a long time, as has Epygi, okay? We develop all of our own products, hardware, software. It's all been developed from the ground up. All the circuit board design, it's all been done in-house. All right, we're on a 3rd generation product, which is the QX line of appliances. We also have the cloud-based ECQX. So it's great for the MSPs. It also includes the ECMon monitoring service. So you can monitor your systems, get access to them remotely. Excuse me, my voice is about ready to give out. And also allow you to manage your configuration files and back those up, and also it has a lot of nice tools in it. We also have our products have always been based on the number of extensions or IP lines, but we've now just launched a product line where we can. It's based on the pricing is based on the number of simultaneous calls. Where like a hotel, you might have a lot of extensions, but maybe not a lot of simultaneous calls. So it's a good good way to get a foot in the door into some of those sites that require that value proposition: mature, reliable, secure. Many people buy the product because of some of the security items that we've implemented in the system. Feature rich, cost effective, and we're compatible with most all endpoints out there, especially phones, and trunk providers such as Clearfly. They do a wonderful job, as many of you already know. Our philosophy is service. So our goal is to personally assist channels and helping their customers. So just let us be an extension of your tech staff. Reach out to us. Okay, if you want to try the ECQX for free, you can do that. We got the cloud portal. You can register there and get the account. You can contact our sales or visit us on the web. Again, this is Andy White. Do encourage this next week. We're going to have another session where we're going to dig into some of the problems that might come up, and we'll take a look at some of those, maybe some packet captures, and peel back the layers a little bit, just to show you what you can do when things don't go as easy or as planned as we had this morning. All right, thank you so much for joining. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll see you again next time. All right, thank you. Bye for now.